strange time issue that I'm not sure what happened in Zoom. Could have been my fault, could have been Zoom's fault. But you're in for a good treat this morning. Jen Davis, who is our Google specialist, is going to go through Google pay-per-click ads and then take some time for Q&A. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I think you can move the slides. Can you not?
Let's see. No.
Okay, so I'll move the slides. You just tell me when.
Okay, hold on one second. All right, well, let's just get started. I just want to kind of set the tone in the sense of Google Ads. So it's one of those things where I'm going to go over a lot of information at a very high level. Obviously, stop and ask questions, but the one thing I want to make sure that you understand is that there are very simple ways to do things, and you can let Google do a lot of these things, or you can really get your hands dirty. So it really is up to you. So the question is, who should use the ads? Every business. There's really no reason why you shouldn't use ads, to tell you the truth. And ultimately, you want to do that if you want customers of some sort. So whether it is selling something, whether it is gathering leads or anything like that, every business has an opportunity to run Google Ads. So here's a quick video on what is Google Ads. We can stop this at about 2 minutes in or so.
Where is it? Are you popping it up?
If you click on the video, it should hit the play button. The play button should come up.
Is it on the next slide?
Yes, it's on the next slide from here, and then
this
just
one
hit
right here.
Yep. And you should have the play button.
There it is. I see it.
Actually, you could stop it at about 1.5 minutes.
On Google, you've come to the right place. We know it can seem complicated at first. That's why we're here to help. Before we jump in, let's go over what search ads are. Imagine you're a florist. At any given moment, someone somewhere is using Google to search for what your business offers. They start by typing a search query into the Google search box. Oh dear, this one's cutting it a bit close. So we have our problem. Someone needs red roses fast. And we have our solution, your business. How do we match the two up and make sure they get the flowers? Let's look at the search results. First, there are what we call organic search results. These match their search but aren't paid ads. Then there are search ads. These usually show above the organic results and provide helpful info that matches the search. You've probably seen this before. They have a small tag that says ad on them. What's the point of search ads, you ask? Well, they help businesses just like yours stand out within the search results and get noticed by the people who are searching. So if your business can get them out of trouble with some speedy flower delivery, this is where you want to pop up. It looks like you've saved the day, but this is just the
Okay, you can stop, Virginia.
Okay.
And next slide.
Short step-by-step videos.
Hang on. Okay.
All right, so that kind of set us up. So if you understood it correctly, these are people that are searching for your business, your product, or your service. So I just wanted to take a step back and do Google Ads versus Facebook ads. So Google Ads are showing to people based on their keyword searches. So Google is all about user intent. Facebook ads, on the other hand, is you're serving it to people that aren't necessarily looking for you, but fit your customer profile, for instance. So that's why we refer to Google Ads as kind of the hand raisers. These are people that are actively looking for your account or for your product or service. That's not to say that Facebook ads isn't as good, and there's certainly reasons to use that over Google, or in most cases use both of them, but that's just a defining difference between the two, and I just wanted to make that clear. So these are people who are actually searching for a product, service, or something related to your product or service. Next slide. So really quickly, this is kind of the Google Ads structure. So if you open up an ad account, what you're going to do is you're going to create the account, then you're going to break it down to campaigns, as you see in the yellow here. And then each one of those are broken up into ad groups, and they contain keywords and text ads, excuse me. And you want to do these tightly themed campaigns. So for instance, if you're selling hiking boots and gym shoes, you don't want those in the same campaigns or the same ad groups. You want to have those separate. That way you can have ads that are detailed to gym shoes and ads that are detailed to hiking boots, and you can tell what the performance is on each one of those themes as well. So that way you know you sell more gym shoes, or you get a better profit on gym shoes or on hiking boots, for instance. So this is the basic structure of the account. And if you go to the next slide, we'll go over the settings that are available in each one of these. So at the account level, things like your billing information, any account preferences, for instance, like your time zone and things like that. And then the campaign level, you have start and end dates if you need an end date. Some campaigns you may only run for a certain time. It might be a particular event or promotion, or you can have no end date and it's just running until you pause it. This is where you also set your daily budget. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The Google network preferences, as in if you just want to appear on Google search engine, or if you want to also appear on partners like AOL search engine, for instance. And then in language or location targeting, and we'll talk a little bit more about location targeting. Language is simply the language the user is searching in. And then at the ad group level, you've got a set of keywords. Placements is also for the display network. And then you have one or more ads, and you do this at a CPC level, which is a cost per click, or a CPM model, which is a cost per impressions. Generally speaking, Google Ads, when you're running search text ads, cost per click is what you want to go with. That way you're paying only for clicks, not for people just seeing your impressions. So let me just stop and see if there's any questions so far, Virginia.
Okay, don't put them in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A piece. We'll bring up the chat just in case someone decides to put it there. No, I don't see any questions at this point. So we'll move on.
Okay, great. All right, if you go to the next, yep. So the one warning I have is that the 80-20 rule applies to Google Ads as well. So 20% of the effort yields 80% of the results. So let me just tell you that the system is smart. You don't have to include every possible keyword. You know, you don't need to include both singular and plural versions of a keyword, and you can take out what we call stop words. Those are words like the, and, of, to, those types of words. You can also take out punctuation. So if for some reason you have like men's shoes, which you would normally put an apostrophe in for the possessive, you can actually take that out because Google automatically takes it out. It's not a big deal if you have it in there, but you don't need to. So it's just one of those things where a lot of people like try to build out thousands of keywords, and really in most cases, there's probably anywhere from 50 to 100 that are really going to make a difference and produce most of the results. So keep that in mind whenever you're working with a Google Ads account. All right, if you go to the next slide, I'll give you some examples of ad and keywords. So this is cosmetic dentistry, New York City. So they're targeting New York City. You can see the keyword over in the fourth column and the ad related to it, for instance. So lots of different, you know, they're doing cosmetic dentistry, they're doing teeth whitening, they're doing dentist, periodontist, and even Invisalign, which is a brand name of something that they offer. If you look at the headlines, which is that ad copy column, and you look at the blue underline and then look at the keyword, you'll see there's a connection there. So they have a keyword of cosmetic dentistry NYC. So their headline has those same keywords in it, same with teeth whitening. Now this is just a very granular look at this. This is probably a lot of different ad groups. They might have cosmetic dentistry as an ad group, for instance, and lots of cosmetic dentistry keywords associated with that one ad. This is just one keyword associated with the ad, just as an example. So you can see, though, that there is a connection to the headline. In some cases, there's actually a connection to other types of or other words in the description of the ad. So if you look at the periodontist, you'll see New York City periodontist in that first line, and then they also include cosmetic and implant dentistry, for instance. So there is a good connection between the keywords and the ads. You're not going to be able to do that with everything, but certainly try to make sure that you're putting in that information either in the headline or in the description line. You'll also notice that the display URL, which is smilesny.com/New York City. So this may not, if you typed in that URL, you may not actually get to a page. This is what's just called the display URL. And that New York City part, you can make up anything you want. So that could have been, for that first one, cosmetic dentistry, just another way to get that keyword into it. We've seen that when you do that, you get a higher click-through rate on your ads, connection, keyword, and the URL that it's showing. Even if it's not a true URL, you actually put in the actual URL on the back end, the user may never see that. All right, so if we go to the next slide, this goes into a little bit more detail. These are called extended text ads. Just to give you an idea, there is a character limitation. So there you can add headline. So it's now 30 characters long. It used to be 25, and you can have 2 headlines. You have the display URL, which I talked about, which your domain name is automatically entered, and then you have 2 optional paths. So the one that we just looked at had New York City. They could have had New York City / cosmetic dentistry or whatever would fit in that 15 characters of each of those additional paths. And then you have 2 description lines, which can be up to 80 characters long. That is up from 70, and that's just recent. What I will tell you about Google Ads is it doesn't need to be a sentence or grammatically correct. You can have instances where it's not a full sentence, or you're kind of doing a series, a list, for instance. And the other thing is use abbreviations. So you can use the ampersand sign versus the word and, or make sure you're using the word doesn't versus does not, for instance. And the other thing too is you'll see in this headline, like expanded text ads dash, nearly 50% more ad space. So they use a dash to kind of break up the 2 thoughts in the headlines, for instance. So that's an opportunity as well. I think a lot of people get kind of stuck on it being a sentence or grammatically correct, and it does not need to be. If you go to the next one, I'll show you an example of a dynamic ad. So the things that are highlighted in either orange or green in the ad, you can create a data feed or use these other scripts like a countdown, for instance. So if you're selling products, for instance, you'll give a data feed to Google, and it can take the information out of that feed, like Gucci 32246 dress, the price, what colors it comes in, for instance, just like the 2018 white Honda Accord Sport. So whatever information you're putting into the feed and telling it to take out, it can do that and then create these ads on the fly, for instance. It can also do things like you'll see the 20% off for 2 more days. That's called a countdown in the ad, and that can be dynamic. So in the back end of Google Ads, I'm putting in information in regards to, I have the sale, it's ending on this date, and it will actually keep this dynamic. So yesterday it would have said 3 days, tomorrow it'll say 1 more day, for instance. Everything else is coming from a feed. So just ways to really hone in on what you're selling, perhaps, or information that's important, either in a countdown or pricing or things like that, even if it's for an event, for instance. So if your event price changes as you get closer because you need to sell more tickets, you can actually do that through a data feed and make sure that it's updated and not have to disrupt your account by creating multiple ads and turning things on and off. So I just want to stop and see if there are any questions on ads before we go a little bit more into details on keywords.
So while I give them a second to type in, I want to, when you talk about a data feed, you fill in like a spreadsheet into Google, and then it pulls that information into your app.
You can do a spreadsheet. You can also do, if it's just a really quick information, you can sometimes just do it in a in Google's interface with 1 or 2 columns and do it manually. For instance, if you just have
Okay.
like 5 rows and like 2 columns, it might be easier to do that. So you have the capability of doing both.
Okay. I just want them to understand what that feed meant and where it was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any questions at this point, so we will go on.
Okay. Next, we're going to go into keyword types. Now, again, I talked about the 80-20 rule. So there's a lot of different keyword, what they call match types. So they start with really, really broad. So in this example, we've got, we're bidding on the word men's formal shoes. And again, if you see in this example, they did not include the apostrophe in that. That can actually match to women's shoe, formal dresses, man's flip-flop, horseshoes. It really matches to a lot. It sees the word shoes as the most important in there, but can also match to, like I said, formal dresses. So broad is not used a lot, particularly when you have low budgets. And what they recommend is the initial bids are about 20% of what your highest bid capability is. As you go down, they have anchor modified broad match, dual anchor modified match, fully modified, phrase match, and exact match. And you can imagine that exact match. So men's formal shoes only will match to the words men's formal shoes, nothing before it, nothing after. And if this is really diving into your product, you want to have this bid at what is considered 100%, the max that you're willing to spend on a click for somebody searching for men's formal shoes. I won't go through all the examples, but you'll see as you work your way down through the broad match modifiers and then into phrase match, for instance, you hone in on your customer. Now, the one thing I would say is that you can't have all exact match. Your search volume will be way too low. So you do need to broaden out a little bit. But again, focus on a couple things. Use the 20-80 rule. Don't build out thousands of these. Start off with 100 and then hone it. Grow a little bit, decrease a little bit, grow a little bit as well. So it's just refining that, for instance. But again, you kind of want to have a couple core keywords at the exact match and then broaden out from there. And we'll talk about negatives, I believe, in the next slide. And so there are ways also to not only with the match types, but to also put in other things that will limit when you show up. So for instance, that men's formal shoes, if you find that you're showing up for formal dresses, you can put dresses as a negative. So if we go to the next slide, this will give some examples of negative. Oh, sorry, we're going to come to that in a second. Sorry, I forgot I put this here. So the other thing with keywords, as you saw, you kind of want to do the 100% at the exact match, but then you get into broad match at 20%. So again, what I would say is find those core keywords. Not every keyword is going to perform the same. Not every exact match is going to perform. There might be a broad match of something that does better, or is similar to an exact match of another keyword, for instance. So again, use the 80-20 rule. For 20% of the keywords, you want to set bids manually, where you're actually choosing them, rather than doing it at a ad group level where you can set all the bids to a max dollar amount for everything. And then again, the other 80% you can be set at a reasonable max that you're willing to pay. And I'll talk a little bit about max CPC and how that plays into it. The screenshot here is the bid simulator. So this will tell you, so if I'm currently bidding on a keyword at $3.08, that is the highest I am willing to pay for a click, for instance. But and that would cost about $613 in this scenario. Now, if I increase my CPC to $7.03, my cost would go up to 1,840, but I get more impressions. I would get almost double the clicks, for instance, and it's telling me that I probably get double the conversions as well. So the bid simulator needs about 7 days worth of data, but it can provide you some information on where you want to make your bids, depending on what your measurement is.
I'm going to ask a question here. Were you ready to go to the next slide? Because I was going to ask a question.
Yeah, ask a question.
So when we're working on Weiskopf Consulting or one of our clients, how often do you go in to check them? Because I know we don't put any of them on manual at this point. We check all of their keywords because we want to keep on top of it. So every day, every other day, how often should someone go in and check this when they're doing the manual bid?
So I go in and check every other day. However, I do have an alert to tell me if something goes really wonky on a day that I haven't necessarily checked it. So again, every other day, I mean, the other thing I always tell people is that a day doesn't make a trend. You want to look for 7 to 10 days. But if anything goes really wonky, I do get an alert at any time. Even if it's like I check it in the morning, if something goes haywire in the afternoon, like all of a sudden, you know, I don't, we have budgets set so I don't run out of budget. But if at 2 o'clock I run out of budget, I will get an email that tells me that, so I can go in and look at it and stay on top of it. So that way it's, you know, because you can't be in there 24/7.
Right.
And every other day I would say is a good check. And I would even say that optimizations, depending on the account, of course, if you're working with $1 million, you know, it's a daily thing. But if you're working with under 10,000, it's probably every other day, and you probably want to make changes or adjustments probably twice a week, just depending on what's going on. Things can happen though, and it sometimes has to do with external forces. For instance, I once had a client, there was something in the news that was, whatever it was very similar to their brand name. So their search volume just blew up overnight, but it had nothing to do with them. So those are things you just want to look for as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And then, as I promised, negative keywords. So for instance, negative keywords have the same match types as in broad match, phrase match, and exact match. This, I will tell you, gets really, really confusing, but Google does a good job. Like if you put a negative keyword in so that you don't show for something, it actually, you can run a test and it will tell you if you've blocked something that you don't want to, because this is a hard concept for people to understand at first. But basically, if I was using the negative phrase match running shoes, I would not show, for instance, for blue running shoes or just running shoes. But the opposite of that, shoes running, I could still show for, or Google running gear, a synonym to it, or blue tennis shoes, another synonym, I could still show the ad. So again, this gets a little confusing. It's one of the toughest concepts that people have when they first start with Google Ads. The nice thing is that it will give you suggestions of negative keywords to add, and then you can run a test to make sure that you're not blocking a keyword that you actually want your ad to show. But it's a great way to kind of, you know, if you're really going for blue tennis shoes, and a lot of people are using running shoes, but you don't sell running shoes, this is a good way to then stop showing for running shoes, but still show for blue tennis shoes, for instance. All right. Let's get into Google Ads scheduling. So let me just stop and see if there's any questions on keywords or match types really quickly. Doesn't look like it.
Nope, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
But I am going to open it up at the end again when we're ready. So
Okay.
we should
Sounds
keep
good.
track of all the things they don't understand.
All right. So there's a lot of other functionality with Google. For instance, you can do ad scheduling. So if your interaction with potential customers relies on a live interaction, whether that's a phone call, coming into a store or something, or even a chat, and you prefer it to be live, a live interaction, you can actually schedule your ads around the time that you're available to do that live interaction. So for instance, in this screenshot, the ads don't start till, it looks like 5 a.m. on this screenshot. So from 12 midnight to 5 a.m., their ads are shut off, and then they're on from 5 until whatever time they do. So you have the capability of doing this You can schedule it different every day. You can turn it off for a day. You can turn it off for the weekends. You have unlimited 24/7 capability in order to change the ad scheduling. So that way you can do it, and if your interaction is live. If it's an e-commerce transaction, you don't care that it happens at 3 in the morning, you can certainly keep your ads on at 3 in the morning, for instance. If you go to the next slide, Google will actually, with data, start to show you your most popular times of the day. So this is kind of their heat map that shows us that, you know, by day and at what hour. So it looks like between midnight and 6 a.m. most days, this is when they're getting the most traction on clicks, for instance. You can look at this by impression, clicks, conversions, and those types of things. So you can make any adjustments to how you bid or when you show your ads based on day and or hour. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you a couple ways you can do this. So for instance, all depends on your business, but if you have a location in the first example in Palo Alto, and you know a lot of people check their phone as to where you are, and 7:30 p.m. on a Friday is like your prime time, you can actually put in bid modifiers to say, okay, if they're on a phone, up my bid by 10%. If they're in Palo Alto, up my bid by 20%. And if it's around 7:30 on a Friday, up my bid 5%. So I might have started with a $5 bid, but when you put in all these percentages, it's going to be, you know, 5x. It's going to be 1.39 times 5, for instance. Same thing, you can do the reverse though. So if they're on a laptop, I just want to have the max bid. If they're in Mountain View, actually drop it because the chances of them coming over to Palo Alto are a little bit less. But if it's almost 5:30 on a Monday, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for them as well. So a little bit less of an increase at a 1.08 times that bid. So you can do this. This is just a couple examples of device, location, and time. You can also do this on demographics, so male versus female as well. You can do this on age on top of that. So you can layer as much as you want on each one. Just realize that obviously as you're increasing and decreasing, it's going to have an impact. It gets really hard to manage this at a very granular level. So you do want to do this at a higher level. You know, just trying to understand phone, location, and time is a lot to handle. If you're putting on demographics, it can get a little much, but you have the opportunity. But again, I would only do this on, again, maybe 20% of the keywords or 20% of the ad groups perhaps at an ad group level versus trying to do this at every single, keyword ad group campaign, for instance. These are your heavy hitters. These are the ones that you know are going to win out every time. All right, if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about budgets. So what I really tell people is determine what your overall monthly budget is, and then divide that by 30.4, and that's what you're going to enter in as your daily budget. So example, this is a $22 a day budget, for instance, but Google will actually interpret that as a spending up to $668 for the month. The reason why they do that is they have the opportunity to spend 20% over your daily budget. So 20% over $22. But what they'll do is that they will stifle another day or a couple other days to stay under the 22. So you never go over the 668 at a monthly level. Now, if they do, they actually credit you. So if your monthly spend turns out to be, let's say, $672, they will actually, they would have served those ads, they'll actually credit you those $4. So you only spend the maximum of what you put in. But on a daily basis, that can fluctuate. They really look at it from a monthly. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, because I know that's a big question when it comes up. It'll just throttle it another time. And the only reason why it spends a daily budget of 20% or up to 20% more is when there's opportunity and it sees it as a good opportunity for your account. So it's not a willy-nilly thing. It really will take some factors into it and see if there's an opportunity based on their data and how users convert within your site and things like that, that it may allow the daily budget to exceed and go up to that 20% if it sees a good opportunity for you. So again, it's not just done just to do it. It's a matter of finding that data if you've already hit the budget and still giving you an opportunity. All right, if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about, again, keyword bids and the auction. So this is another really hard concept. But what a lot of people think is that you just simply have to pay to be number one as an advertiser. And actually, it's not the case. Being number one does not mean that you're paying the most. Quality is what outranks, and I'll talk about quality score in a second. But if you look at this example, advertiser one has set a bid of $2. Their max bid, that's the most they're willing to spend. But they have an awesome quality score. It's a 10 out of 10. So that gives them an ad rank of 20. So they actually would only pay $1.61 in this auction. Where if you look at, we'll just jump down to advertiser 4, who is willing to pay up to $8, but has a horrible quality score of 1 out of 10, giving them an ad rank of 8. They will actually pay the highest CPC in this instance. And they're number 4, which might actually show below the fold. So it's all about your price is, your price equals the ad rank of the person below you divided by your quality score plus 1 cent. You're only going to pay 1 cent higher in order to get that top space. So again, it's all about quality, not necessarily max bid. Now, there are times when you're going to come up against accounts that you have the same quality score, for instance, and there it's going to be about the max bid that you're willing to pay. But again, if we look at advertiser 1 and 2, and let's say that the quality score was the same, you'd only pay 1 cent more than the max bid of the one below you, for instance. So it's never like if I bid up to $4, somebody else bids $2, I'm not paying $4, I'm only paying $2.01 to outbeat them if we have a similar quality score, for instance. This is a really hard concept to understand. What you really want to take away from this is focus on quality score, and the account will give you the quality score on every keyword. And give you historical information as well as give you recommendations. So if you go to the next slide, these are the things that are taken into quality score. So first, it's going to be the landing page, making sure that if you're selling a Nikon camera, you're actually taking them to a landing page that has that Nikon camera for sale and not a Christmas ornament, for instance. Now that's, kind of apples and oranges. But even the littlest thing of a Nikon camera in the ad and going to a Sony camera is going to have an impact on the landing page score. The ad relevancy also is making sure that you have keywords that are connected to the keyword that you're bidding on and the landing page. So there needs to be some connection there. Again, I'm selling a Nikon camera, I'm bidding on a Nikon camera keyword. I need to make sure Nikon camera is in my ad and then on my landing page. And again, that's where keyword relevancy is going to come in. So now granted, not everybody searches in a proper way or how we would necessarily advertise or use keywords that we would use either industry or to describe our products or something like that. But Google is smart. So for instance, if I'm selling a Nikon camera and they spell the word Nikon with 2 Ks instead of 1, for instance, I don't necessarily want to show that in my ad, but Google's smart enough. It's not going to ding me on the keyword relevancy or the ad text for being correctly spelled, by, for instance. Click-through rate. So keeping a high click-through rate. And this is going to tie into the historical performance as well, is that just making sure that your ads are actually getting clicks, that you're enticing people enough in order for them to click. but also making sure you don't have a huge bounce rate where they click and then leave right away. So while bounce rate is not on here, it is important to kind of look at as well. Simply historical performance. You know, sometimes when you're first entering into Google Ads, you're not going to rank very well. And that's just because there's accounts that might have years of history where they've been doing all these things really well. It's just a matter of keeping it going and letting it run. It may take a month, it may take 3 months to get a little bit, but as time goes on, you should actually see your cost per clicks go down. And then simply is all of that, you're maintaining your higher ad rankings. And when you're doing that, you're able to outbeat the competition even at a lower bid. Again, Google provides this information at the keyword level. You can run tests. It will tell you historical information. And then it will also tell you things like your landing page isn't relevant, or your ad isn't relevant, or maybe your click-through rate is down. So it does give you some kind of ideas. The only thing that it doesn't really do is historical performance and higher ad rankings. It doesn't give you information on that, but you should just know from a time standpoint on historical. Higher ad rankings, it's a little bit of a guess. The lower your quality score, the lower your ad rankings. So really focus on quality score, and that will improve your ad rankings. All right. The other thing with quality score too is that you want to use all the elements that Google is allowing you to have. So these are things from like site links, adding your phone number, your location if you have a brick and mortar store, callouts. So here's a couple examples with booking.com. They actually have social extensions, callout extensions, a review extension, which is a third-party site review, and then site links. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. The more that you have, the higher your quality score as well. So use as much as you can. It not only takes up physical space of your ad, but it also improves your overall quality score. All right, next slide, I want to talk a little bit about location targeting. So there's a lot of different options. I'll show some quick examples, but you can target whole countries. You can target areas like DMAs or cities. You can do a radius. So I want to do 20 miles around Chicago. And then you can also do groupings. What you want to do is narrow it down as much as you can. So you can start all the way at the country level, and you can go down to 1 mile radius of a zip code. But you need to make sure that you're ensuring that you're targeting the right areas. So if you're a brick and mortar store and all your customers come from 20 miles, radius 20, maybe 25 miles. You can play with it a little bit. If you go to the next slide, you can actually then exclude things, but also put bid modifiers. So the first one under Baltimore, Washington, we have 3 circles. So what they've done is obviously something in the middle. Let's call it a brick and mortar store. So if they're within 10 miles, we're going to bid up 10% because the chances of them getting there quicker or getting there is pretty high. But if we go out to 20 miles, maybe I'm only willing to pay 5% more. If we go out to 50 miles, I'm only willing to pay my max, for instance. So you can layer on different radiuses and have different bid modifiers there. The other one, for instance, you'll kind of see this red mark as well, where everything else is kind of that gradient blue. So you can actually exclude things. So this is actually excluding Jersey City. I don't know what they have against Jersey City, but for some reason they don't want to do that, but they want to do everything around it. So they're doing certain zip codes as well as a 2 mile around New York, but for some reason, Jersey City, we shouldn't be showing in that. And those are people that are going to be in that area. And you can also extend it to people who are looking for things in that area. So I could be in San Fran and looking for this product in Jersey City by typing in, Nikon camera, Jersey City, and I won't show because I have an exclusion here. So you do have ways of both targeting and upping your bids, but also excluding certain sections as well. So again, I'll just stop there and see if there are any quick questions.
So there are no questions typed in the chat box or into the questions at this point.
Okay. So other things you can do is custom audiences. So you can actually take your customer data information, usually email addresses, upload them to Google, and you can do a couple things. One, you can target the people who already know you. If you have a great repeat type business, this might be a great opportunity, and you can actually bid up by saying, hey, these are my customers. If they're searching for this, bid up 50% because they're going to buy from me. You can actually exclude those current customers and reach only new customers. So I can upload, again, a data feed with customer email and say, these are my customers. They're looking for me. They already know about me. Don't show me. I only want to show to new people. And then the other thing that Google can do is it can look at your customer data, and then you can target customers who are similar to them based on search history and websites that they visited. Whatever data that they have, they can kind of create their own section or their own segment of people, and you can bid up on them, for instance, if you like that criteria. It doesn't really show you the criteria, but it does, it will match to any of that information. Google's match rate is pretty good. It generally is about 50% depending on your customer size. You do need about 1,000 matches in order to use this because it's supposed to be kind of aggregate anonymous data. So if you do have a good customer list and one that's pretty up to date, this might be an opportunity for you as well. Next slide. And then I want to talk a little bit about remarketing. So again, this is customers come to your site. They are, cookied, basically. They leave your site, but then as they do more Google searches or look at other sites, they have the opportunity. You can remarket to them and specifically show your ad to them since they've been to your site and maybe they didn't convert in a way that you wanted. And again, you can bid up or bid down in this. You can also set a frequency. So if you know that after they've seen your ad for 5 times, they no longer convert, you can set a frequency of 5, and that way you'll no longer be remarketing that person. You can also set kind of how you do this in the sense that you want to remarket to them this week, tomorrow, 30 days from now, which is really great if you have I've used this with beauty products where they might buy lotion, for instance, and in 30 days most likely need more lotion. So you can always set to remarket them in that kind of 30, maybe 25 day mark to remind them that they need to check their supply and to not forget about you. So there's great ways to remarket those who have come to your site and either converted or not converted, depending on your business model. All right, next slide. I do want to talk about testing. So in particular with Google Ads, it does give you the opportunity to test, like do an A/B test of headlines, descriptions, and those types of things. And that's always one thing that I recommend, particularly when you're starting off, is you may have a particular way of talking about your product or service, but your consumers may resonate with something else. So you can set this up, actually, it's called experiments. It's very easy, you kind of split the traffic. And you can measure it based on click-through rates, conversion rate, whatever you really want to see what your winning ad is. So this is something that I do recommend to those when you're first starting off, just to see what's resonating. There is always, people sometimes test and retest and retest and retest. Try not to do that. And I would at least have one evergreen ad that's always running, that is, one of your top performers as well. So that way you don't hurt your click-through rate, because that is one thing with experiments, you do hurt your click-through rate potentially if you have kind of a clunker of an ad in one of your tests. So having an evergreen ad that's also running at the same time will help with that. And then next slide, I want to talk about measurements. So how are you doing once you're setting up a Google Ads account? So you want to track any and all conversions, whether that's phone calls, lead forms, newsletter signups, e-commerce transactions. You can even do a number of pages viewed. If you feel like if they viewed 5 pages, that is a potential customer or a particular length on the site, as in they read multiple articles, for instance. You can even track that as a conversion. But definitely anything that you find is important, your call to action, make sure that you are tracking it. And that helps you. So then you can do, for instance, if you're a service-based industry, and you have a lead form, then you can honestly track how many, what does it cost to get a lead? And then you can keep offline information too, how many of those leads turn into customers, and maybe get your cost per customer in addition to your cost per lead. And that's something that you set up as a goal. If I am willing to pay $100 for a lead, for instance, and I'm doing this and I'm paying $200, then I know I have to reduce my cost somehow. I have to decrease my CPC, which I can do with bids, or I can actually up my quality score, which will bring my cost down as well. I might start bidding on different keywords or optimizing my keyword bids, adjusting my budgets, for instance, if I need to bring my cost down. If my goal is $100 per lead and I'm only paying $50 and I want more leads, that's an opportunity to increase budgets, increase bids, for instance, and maybe get into some of that targeting where I can bid up on leads based on, time of day, device, for instance, to capture those that I know convert better. But it's all about tracking conversions and then using the data, impressions, clicks, cost, and all of that in order to see how you are doing. And if you go to the next slide, this is just a example of, for instance, a dashboard that you could put together to understand, how much are you spending on a monthly basis or a weekly basis? What's your average cost per click? What's your average cost per 1,000 impression? How many clicks are you getting? How many conversions? What's your conversion rate? What's your cost per conversion? And you can look at this from a campaign level. You can look at this from a device level. So perhaps you might have, in this case, it looks like computers tend to spend more as well as convert better, for instance. And on the campaign level, it looks like we've got, analyzing data, for instance, as one of the higher spends and click-through rates. But we'd want to look to see, and also we've got a cost per conversion of $12, where our creating dashboards, is really a cost per conversion of $100 or $109, for instance, but it's only spending $1,200 a month. So there's lots of information that you can look at and decide, is that creating dashboards, is that really worth the $100, or could I put more money into analyzing data and get more leads at $12, or maybe a little bit higher if I'm putting more data into it. So it's all about looking at the measurements, understanding them, and then making your optimizations from there. And the next slide is that really it's all about rinse and repeat. So it's always refining the keyword list, adding new text ads or extensions, or Google Ads really good about updating things and adding new features. So things that you should always be looking at. Don't do it just to do it. Make sure that it makes sense for your business, because some of these things can cost money in the sense that, it's great to have bid modifiers, and I can put modifications on a female that's a certain age with a certain income at a certain place. But those are all things that I'm probably going to pay more for. So just take that into consideration. But then also, of course, review your conversions, making sure you're getting the call to action that you are looking for. Adjust your targeting in any way, whether that is location targeting, excluding things, upping bids on certain locations, and then ultimately managing the bids. And again, it's just a cycle that you kind of keep going through until you find that right mix. And there's a point where there's going to be a well-oiled machine, but it's not going to last long. It's only going to last a week to a month to maybe 2 months, depending on the business, as competitors come in and out, for instance, seasonality and those types of things. But after about, I would say, 3 months of doing this consistently, taking a look at making optimizations, you'll know the moves that you need to make on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and get comfortable with it. And you might even be able to set up like automated scripts within Google Ads in order to do some of the heavy lifting for yourself as well. So that is all that I have. So certainly want to open it up for questions.
We do have questions, and I have a bonus today for everyone as we finish. So if they'll stay on after we close, that will be great. So hang on. The question is regarding remarketing. Where do you see the data on their activity? Do you create a new ad for just this list, or do you change up the current ad?
So a couple different things. You actually don't see the data on their activity, as in what you'll do is you will put a pixel on your website, and you can do this through Google Analytics as well, that will capture, it will cookie people, and then you will set up a list in the back end that says, for instance, anybody that comes to the site, views 3 pages, but doesn't convert, add them to this list, and we'll call it our remarketing list. And then you can create a particular campaign to just market to that particular list. However, you can also just add that list as a dynamic audience to any of your current campaigns as well. I do recommend setting up a separate campaign because you can customize the ad text to them, like, you know, and actually Google can actually do what I call the creepy remarketing. If you've ever searched for a product, for instance, and then you see the ad with a product picture, that's called dynamic remarketing. You can also do that through Google as well. It takes a little bit more technical knowledge with data feeds and pixels and things like that. But if you just do a text remarketing ad, you can actually customize the text to say, hey, you know, you were looking at a product, or hey, here's a 20% off coupon, for instance, or, you know, something else, for instance, that speaks to them because they visited your site in some way. But you can certainly obviously add the remarketing list to your other campaigns and just up the bid, and they'll see your normal ads as well. I actually suggest both.
So when you talked about, I hope that answers your question, Linda. When you were going to the rinse and repeat process at the end, and you also talked about an evergreen ad, right? So if there's one ad that always works for you, that gets response, that gets conversion, how long would you leave it the same, or would you change it up?
So I would leave that the same as long as you possibly can, because again, historical performance and click-through rate is part of quality score. And when you can certainly pause an ad and it will retain its information, but if you change the ad in any way, it resets its history. So if I have an ad running for 3 months and I need to make a change to it, and let's say it's a very purposeful change, as in something's changed in my business, the new ad, it creates a new ad, deletes the old ad, it creates a new ad, and my ad history starts over. So as whatever you can, evergreen ad, generic as possible, so that you may not have to change it. And certainly things like COVID obviously made changes for a lot of us, for instance. So that could have affected it, but make it as general as you can, something that you won't have to change. And if you can let that run for months, if not years, if it's a top performer, just to have that ad history and that click-through rate, it is worth it.
Okay, so I want the ones of you to stay on. I have a special treat, but I'd like to thank everyone for coming and apologize for the time change.